me, I'm a little bit skeptical of the apocalyptic predictions like that you hear out there. But nevertheless, I think regardless, like you said, we definitely are affecting the planet in some way. And I think everybody should have an interest in doing their best to improve things.
Yeah, there's definitely way more opinion than objectivity. And yeah, even in the last 30 or so years, I've noticed that shift in the
Libtard, huh?
yeah,
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
The guy that had the video with the AK, you're calling a libtard. Have a catchy jingle along with it, so you remember it, right?
Gatorade, quench your thirst.
There you go. Oh, boom, Gatorade. Send us a check. So extraordinary statements require extraordinary evidence, and like the more sensational and emotionally backed something seems, the more critical you should be of it.
Hey, do you want to earmark my liver? And they'd be like, yeah, sure, you look pretty fit. And then you'd be like, hey, all of a sudden I really love vodka, and you're just like
I like a little bit of elbow room, like some breathing room there. That would be nice. Kind of like the people that you're standing in line at the grocery store and they're basically like humping your leg. They're so close.
And subscribe, goddammit.
Hey, welcome to yet another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Erik Rosenblatt. We would absolutely love you if you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share, comment, whatever. We're all about keeping the conversation going, so that would help out a lot.
And I'm Casey Rochford, and you know already that we write our own music. And now you can pick it up on iTunes. We're also on Spotify. And if none of that's your game, you can always go to patreon.com/KSMvidcast and support the show that way. You'll still get the music. So, what should we discuss today?
Well, as it turns out, this is the final episode of our very first season or year. Kind of hard to believe we've been doing this for a year already. So I thought maybe this would be a good time to address viewer comments or responses, things like that, and engage with the viewers.
Yeah, that's a good idea because, with this being the last episode of the season, people are going to have to wait for season 2 an entire week, till next Friday. And we want to give them something to chew on in that week that they have to wait until season 2 starts. So,
yeah, I think it'd be a good plan. And there aren't that many comments right now, but we'll respond to them. We do actually pay attention.
Yeah, there are some good ones in there. I guess we'll maybe kind of go in a relatively chronological order.
Yeah. In the order the episodes came out. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and we won't hit every one of them, but there's some that are particularly thought-invoking. And I guess maybe we'll start off with the abortion minute microscopy, which I think was like the second one, second minute microscopy ever. So that was pretty early on. A YouTube user by the name of Raymond Hall, he said, I think there are more dire consequences to being against abortion than being for it. The problem is, those on the right will always consider it to be murder, and nothing is going to change their mind. Problem with the left is that there is no compromise. A woman considers the child 100% hers instead of viewing it as a shared creation between her and the father, and nothing is going to change her mind about that. The other problem is that while it's still legal, it is a woman's right in some states to get an abortion up till the day of birth, which provides those on the right with a stronger argument that it is murder or inhumane. Then there is the argument about how it is funded. Should the federal/state and local government fund abortions when that money could be used for other medical services?
Oh, wow. Just that statement alone could spawn an entire episode. Honestly, there's a lot of interesting points there. I mean, he does make some excellent points. Where to begin?
Well, I guess like his first real point is the idea that a child is like 100% the woman's choice, whereas he's making the argument that father should have a say in whether or not the child is born or aborted.
Yeah, I think that that's a valid point. I mean, it is, like he said, it's a creation between two people. That it takes two people for that to happen. So I think the father should at least have some say in that regard. I think obviously you have an organism living inside of you. I think you probably have a little bit more priority in that regard. It's a little more weight on that side, but still, I
mean, I can see that argument, and I would probably say that there's a strong suggestion that the man's opinion should be heard and should be considered. But I don't know that there's any obligation to give it kind of like a certain weight in the vote, because no matter what, it's always going to be a 50-50 split in the vote. One person wants to do one thing, the other person wants to do whatever it is they want to do, and ultimately it is happening. It's all happening in the woman's body. It's their pain to endure, and it's ultimately their responsibility long term if, say, the guy turns out to be a deadbeat.
Well, and that's, I mean, in general, in split situations like that, the man is on the hook financially.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's a lot of, like, we could go into custody issues and how that is kind of unfair for both sides, depending on the state you're in, depending on the circumstances and whatnot. I've seen plenty of single mothers getting screwed over, and I've seen plenty of single fathers getting screwed over too. So
yeah, I think it
definitely goes both ways.
It does. I mean,
but
then
that's a living child. Like on the abortion topic, because nobody is a clairvoyant, you don't know whether or not the father's always going to stay in the picture. So you have to assume you will be raising this child on your own. Like, even if you're married and you want an abortion, you need to go on the assumption of the worst case scenario.
I'd say in all matters of life, that's a pretty reasonable approach.
Yeah, and if nothing else, it's autonomy. I mean, like, would you really want there to be a law saying that the father gets a particular percentage of say in a decision like that with her body,
Well, in that regard, I would say it's kind of akin to saying that, let's say you're married or something, and one partner wants to undergo surgery, either for whatever reason, whether it be cosmetic surgery or some kind of life-saving surgery. And if the other partner could have a say in whether they could undergo that surgery or not, I think that would be pretty bad. Kind of bullshit at that point. So I think that sort of philosophy, that philosophical framework, kind of explains where I stand on it. And I mean, I'm ambivalent in a lot of ways, but that's a completely different tangent. I do want to bring up the one of his points there, though, that the whole point of ownership of the child. and being someone who's very firmly in support of individual rights and self-ownership, I do kind of have a problem with that, because it kind of discounts the humanity of the child. Granted, depending on how you look at it, they may or may not be a human being per se, but depending.
Well, they certainly aren't capable of casting a vote in the matter.
Well, no, but does that mean they don't count at all?
Well,
so,
how else do you know what they want? Because that falls into the clairvoyancy category.
well, would anybody vote for themselves to be killed? I mean, my point is that maybe it depends on I mean, I've seen some pretty shitty households. Maybe the kid would be like, hell no.
If you're like a 10-cell blastocyst or whatever, if you're a 10-cell blastocyst and you somehow had a way of thinking, which you don't, no. And you were like, well, I don't know what life is. I have zero clue. I'm new to the scene here. So I don't really know what I'm missing. So if it's going to be crappy, I don't know, like.
Well, sure.
Way off into the weeds, though.
Exactly. I mean, it's just a little bit of a thought that I had reading it, because this is actually quite thought-provoking.
Yeah. Well, one thing he said that I really want to touch on a factual basis is he was propagating a little bit of false news that comes from like the Trump administration about aborting up to the day of birth. That's not a thing that happens unless, and this is extraordinarily rare, unless there's some threat to the life of the mother. Then it would be okay to do something like that in the third trimester. I don't know that it's actually ever happened the day before birth, because that's called a 1-day premature baby. Like, you can have a premature baby like weeks ahead of its due date. So nobody's killing this kid like a day before it's due.
Well, now I'd encourage people to do, look this up, but I remember seeing something on the news and then reading something about it, there being a bill that would allow for that, or some kind of legal change up to the right before birth, that abortions could be performed in a particular state. I can't remember. It was something I heard in passing, and but I know that
it was probably just a proposition, though, right? It's not actually.
I don't remember, but that maybe he's going off of that. It's not like a countrywide thing. It's something that's specific to a particular state, and I don't remember what state it is. But I remember somebody performing an interview and asking the person, some legislator or whatever, if it's possible to perform an abortion up to like a day before birth, and they said, well, yeah. So I don't know.
I think that definitely falls under the medically necessary category, though, because
I don't think this was in that context, but that's something where I think this we can move on, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Probably something we should have looked up before responding.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I didn't know you were going to bring that up.
Well, I'm pretty certain that I don't know the exact state you're talking about, but I fact checked this like up and down before, and that without the clause of there being a medical necessity, to preserve the life of the mother, you just can't do that. Like on the federal level, there's already a protection, so a state can't override that protection unless it's got some extraordinarily mitigating circumstances. It can't just be because you want to.
Yeah, and this is something that was fairly relatively recent. So I don't know if this happened after this particular person commented. But yeah, that oh man. I think we've been we let's move on, because we have a lot of comments.
Yeah, well,
we could spend like an hour just talking about this one comment.
Yeah, I mean, he kept going, and he said abortion's never necessary medically, but that's not true either, but
well, yeah, that's not true. Yeah.
see above comments, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have it. It'll already be on the screen, actually. So
yeah. So then we had a guest, Godly Mind State, who now goes by Ocean the Ghost. We had him on to talk about issues of racism, and there was a comment that was extraordinarily short, and so we'll probably go over this pretty quickly, but it was something that highlights some of the darker side of humanity, as you can expect from an episode on racism.
yeah.
Guy by the name of Criminal Sneak, or gal, I don't know, said, "You lost me at white supremacy. Laugh my fucking ass off. Cool libtard shill stuff that nobody watches."
Libtard, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
The guy that had the video with the AK, you're calling a libtard. Oh my god.
yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, if people out there actually have some belief that there's a superiority gained by the amount of melanin in your skin, please come on the show and explain your thought process, because I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so would I. And I mean, even extending a little bit further, like nationality or your cultural differences. Explain why one is superior to the other. Yeah,
I mean,
that's
we harp on that a lot, so there's probably no point in beating a dead horse, but I just wanted to point out that those people are sticking their head out of the shadows a little more lately, and certainly we're no stranger to it when we put out an episode on the dangers of racism. And
yeah, and it's kind of thing is, it's hard to tell. Like there's a lot of trolls out there, people just trying to stir up trouble because they like to watch fires burn or something like that. You basically just drop something in the comments and watch the mayhem. So it's kind of difficult to tell, especially something as ridiculous as that.
Yeah.
But he went on too, right?
He did. When I said something akin to that, and he said, "I don't think any race is superior. There's no white supremacy in modern America. 3 random white dudes going into places, shooting plenty of white people. Is that white supremacy? Where's the white supremacy exactly?"
Okay,
Well,
so he gives one example of something, some hypothetical situation, and there's no white supremacy.
we didn't even talk about mass shootings so much in that episode. Why is he using that as like his sole example to say, "Oh, look at that, no white supremacy," because white people died?
Yeah, you don't have to kill somebody to believe that you're superior to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's something internal. So, yeah, I think that's kind of a broad dismissal. Well, it's in fact saying there's absolutely no white supremacy in America is kind of like saying it's all over the place.
Right.
The truth is not so extreme in that regard.
Yeah.
Man, wow, that's it's a given that anytime you talk about that, you're going to get somebody that'll propose ludicrous ideas like that.
Yeah. So I don't know that was a troll, because this person actually did respond with some form of how they're thinking, but that thinking is, logically fallacious.
Sure. I mean, of course, it's all a matter of perspective too. If you're somebody whose scope of the world is very narrow, and you never stepped foot outside of your town, and you just signed up for the internet, and bam, you're on YouTube making comments, I guess,
Yeah.
something like that. So it's a matter of the person's experience.
Well, the second episode we had with Godly Mind State, he had his friend Tip come on, and he met a guy in the military who had never seen a black person before. So, that still happens.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of shocked in this day and age, but hey, like I said, some people don't step foot outside their hometown, and
Yeah. So I guess we can move on.
All right.
was I going to go to next? It was
Drug prices one, right? Like drug pricing.
yeah. So I just I we were talking about like price fixing and stuff like that, and we got to talking about how like setting a ceiling would actually create like shortages and stuff. And I was doing some extra research, and when a price is set below the equilibrium price, quantity demand will exceed quantity supplied, and excess demand or shortages will result. That's from Khan Academy. They're pretty good.
Yeah.
So price controlling medications could be pretty well set to just move around an equilibrium price. Like setting a ceiling doesn't mean it's like set in stone. It just means that there's like, a spot that moves above a certain point. I think there's like, like with wages and stuff, there's certain companies where like the CEO can only make X amount of percent more than the lowest paid person or whatever. So that moves like this,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of what I was trying to drive at. And that's about all I was trying to have as an addendum to that. But
Yeah, and that's good to kind of clarify things. We try to do that, and we probably will a lot more going forward. I mean, the equilibrium price thing it's sort of flexible, as a lot of these things are. There's no hard and fast rules for economics. It's kind of things fluctuate a lot, so that's good to point out. Yeah.
So and then we had another guest, Anna, who came on to talk about kind of like the emotional effects of climate change. And a viewer by the name of Jason Melton said, in response to the idea that humans are causing climate change, he said, "We are not to blame. According to the Vostok ice core records, CO2 level changes have followed Earth's overall temperature changes at an 800-year lag for the last 800,000 years. That means that our current CO2 levels are the result of Earth's overall temperature 800 years ago. World leaders have convinced their dependents that this works in the reverse order relatively quickly, and that we are to blame so that they can tax us out of a false shared guilt in order to be able to afford to fight climate change, an unstoppable natural cycle. What we may need are commercial solutions that will aid in the survival of the human race throughout the coming centuries." The following is a source of information for this comment, and he did list an entire journal article in the comment, which I'm not going to read.
Oh no.
And bore people to death. So, but it was the title was a historical carbon dioxide record from the Vostok ice core. If anyone is interested, they can find his comment on the episode "Are We the Next Dinosaur?" or they can look up that title.
Did you read that at all? Like go through it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's like legit?
So people aren't wrong when they say that the Earth goes through cycles, and
Oh, of course. I mean, the sun.
Well, I mean, like it's irrefutable to say that there's like a sine wave sort of activity in the climate. That's demonstrable. But when we call it climate change, we're talking about like drastic climate change, and that like that sine wave has been like sine waving up, and it's like taken a huge spike up, like exponentially, pretty much almost immediately with the Industrial Revolution. And when you're pumping out all this stuff into the atmosphere, it's kind of hard to think that it won't have some effect. I mean, like the fact that, the skies in China are all smoggy and stuff, like that's
well, and they used to be in the US too.
Yeah.
Remember how LA was,
Yeah, that's doing something,
Yeah, of course it is. And me, I'm a little bit skeptical of the apocalyptic predictions like that you hear out there. But nevertheless, I think regardless, like you said, we definitely are affecting the planet in some way. And I think everybody should have an interest in doing their best to improve things. I do have to agree with one thing that he said. Well, maybe not agree, but kind of, I guess I sort of align with the idea that a lot of this, the policy propositions to fight climate change are pretty much largely bullshit. Um, and we need something real, which is why I'm an advocate for nuclear power, because that's the one thing that I think is actually capable of providing energy needs without all the rigmarole of everything else, whether it be coal or solar, wind. They all have issues. Nuclear power, I love it.
I more or less agree with that. Like, I wouldn't say stuff being proposed is bullshit per se. I just don't know that it's doing enough. Like, getting rid of plastic bags, getting rid of straws, that's not enough. You know,
and it's basically taking fire at non-guilty parties. Like, straws aren't changing the environment. Of course, if you look at the whole straw thing, there's problems with that. Plastic bags, all that stuff, garbage, whatever, that isn't, those are little tiny things that don't really affect change in a large way. What the things that do, the smog generators and stuff, that chemicals going into the atmosphere, it's industrial production, it's shipping and trucks and cars and all that stuff.
Yeah, and we're making strides to move away from those sorts of things with
exactly. But that's my point, is like a lot of these things feel very I don't know, like half-assed, and also focused. Maybe I need to go. This whole thing could be a completely different episode, but I feel like they're addressing the wrong things that don't have anything to do with anything that's going on and won't ever solve those problems. If you want to solve the problems, you actually have to look at it logically and say, okay, what are the things causing these things? Okay, how do we actually solve this? And be reasonable about it, and don't be afraid of fucking nuclear, because nuclear power is awesome. And I mean, that's it. We haven't built a nuclear power plant in this country in forever, and that's, there you go.
Yeah, the part I kind of agree with him on is the last thing he said. You know, we need commercial solutions to aid in survival through what's coming. Because, like I said earlier, you kind of got to plan for the worst case scenario. Like, if we don't get our act together, how are we going to survive? Like, do we need to colonize Venus, as we talked about in, like the last episode? Like, what is it we have to do if we go to hell in a handbasket,
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. I completely agree that we need practical solutions, and I think people want to provide those, and there's some good ideas out there, but just a bunch of carbon taxes aren't going to solve that problem. You can't institute a carbon tax and then have a complete blockade on the creation of nuclear power or anything like that, and then think that's going to make a difference. Because wind and solar can't do it. I don't care about. I'll sit down and debate that with anybody any day. Wind and solar cannot provide energy needs for this country unless we want to go back to like 1800s energy usage.
I mean, they're regionally and locally effective. Like, if you want to put solar on your house or have wind out in your, like, giant plains or whatever, like, or between mountains or on the ocean, or have turbines working with the tide or whatever. Like, if you're somewhere where that does work really well, doesn't hurt. Go ahead and do it. Like, it helps.
I totally agree. People, individuals, and businesses and things should be doing that, and should be encouraged to do that, because I think, if you yourself put solar panels on your roof, or have a chance to erect a wind turbine without the state finding you, because that's happened before, putting you in jail for a wind turbine. If that doesn't happen and you can actually do it, then you reduce your demand for energy. therefore whatever system provides energy needs to provide that much less. So that's
In
a good
fact,
thing, but
I
people should
remember
be doing it.
I remember back in the day, you talked about like finding a piece of property that had like a pretty sizable creek or whatever, building a water wheel that would generate electricity, and you like calculated it out to where it would probably be pumping electricity back into the grid, and instead of a bill, you would get a check from the electric company.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the kind of things that people should be doing. And to me, I think sharing ideas is kind of the way to the future, because there's ideas all over the place, and I think people really want to make a difference, and they should be encouraged to.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on and on about that one. Just the whole thing, like, because I do really care a lot about taking care of the planet, and not being a menace to the environment. But I think that sometimes people see things as worse than they are, or the problem is different than it is. And
I mean, if we don't actually do anything and just let things keep going the way they are, there will definitely be some pretty serious ramifications. I don't know that we'll go extinct or anything, but there will be a lot more challenges to survival.
well, yeah, I mean, according to the predictions out there, sure, I don't think that humans will go extinct, but at what cost to the rest of all other life forms too?
I think we're in the midst of the next mass extinction, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, and ecosystems are very fragile, interdependent on each other, different organisms and stuff. So you kill the plankton, and well, that's like half life forms die.
Yeah, that reminds me, that's something I totally forgot to talk about in the Venus colonization episode, is like the importance of worms and like pollinators and all that stuff that you would have to like cart with you to Venus. But anyway,
yeah,
nobody commented on that, so I guess we go down that rabbit hole right now. But why don't we move away from doom and gloom for a moment? Why don't we talk about our Mandela Effect episode? Kind of like a weird and out there one, where if people missed that episode, effectively it's this trick of the memory where you remember things a certain way, and then when you're shown that they are not that way, you're just left in this state of disbelief. Like I could have swore he said, "Luke, I am your father."
Not a trick of the memory. The globalists are taking over. It's like
we went through a whole lot of examples, but there was a really good one that we missed that a viewer by the name of Sonnet of Defloration brought up. He said, if memory error is the case, then what about Gatorade commercials saying quench your thirst at the end? Never happening, period. I watched them all.
Ooh.
Is that one that you've, like, I gotta admit, I remember that slogan. I don't know that, like, is it something they just wrote and never said? Or, like, I didn't really look too deeply into this, but
well, if this person
that phrase,
if this person is saying they watched them all, you'd think that if there was a written statement, that would have been part of it.
I mean, unless it's just on packaging, but
maybe I do kind of remember that. Now,
like, if that's your slogan, why wouldn't you say it in the commercial?
Yeah, and you have a catchy jingle along with it, so you remember it, right?
Gatorade, quench your thirst.
There you go. Oh, boom, Gatorade. Send us a check. We just wrote your jingle. It's possible that there was another drink or product or something that had that catchphrase, and the two got blended together.
Squeeze, quench your thirst.
Squeeze it. Oh my God. How about, okay, here's one nobody remembers. Orbits.
No, geez.
Remember the drink with the little
weird,
the balls floating around in it? I love that. It was so weird and good, and I like weird stuff.
Slither down your throat. It was like, oh man.
Yeah, it was strange. I do kind of recall that. But again, it's like memory is not really perfect. The way the brain works and neural connections work and stuff, like things get lumped together. So it's possible that there was another product. That's what's popping into my head, is that there was some other, like Powerade or whatever. I think Powerade actually is a lot newer than Gatorade. But some other product that had the same slogan that somehow got combined with Gatorade in people's minds.
Like, how awesome is that to be a company and people remember you for a slogan you never even paid money to a marketing team to come up with? Like, it's just like free advertising that's this trick of the mind or whatever. Like,
yeah, exactly. Well, and in fact, you think about this too. Like, think about all the, because when we went over the Mandela Effect, a lot of them were products, because you're assailed with all this information all the time, advertising and stuff. Those are the things you remember. And I mean, I remember jingles from the early 80s, commercials, like a commercial that ran for like a month. I remember it from like 1982, this song or something like that. And I mean, that's effective. But yeah, the stuff does blur together as time wears on. So yeah, I don't know. So you remember something like that?
it sounds familiar. I haven't looked, like I said, I didn't look too deeply into where that one comes from, but I know that's an example that we ended up missing. Not that we were going to hit them all, but
No, there's hundreds of them.
yeah, I thought it was a pretty interesting one though, because like most of the examples you had given me, I was like guessing them correctly, and you were like, oh well, most people remember it as, and this is one that tripped me up. I was like, what?
Yeah, well, you're actually from this version of this universe, unlike the rest of us. So, or you're immune to the effects of government mind control, MK Ultra.
or I have a situational awareness of a ninja. I mean, I don't know.
Could be, yeah. Oh man. All
Anyway,
right, so what do we got coming up next?
So next, we've got a couple comments again from Raymond Hall on our episode about the Electoral College. Your votes don't count.
Oh yeah.
So Raymond said, I have some ideas I'd like to see, but will never happen. 1, make elections and voting illegal. 2, abolish all political parties. 3, implement a massive tax on political news coverage. 4, ban lobbyists. 5, create governments based on regions instead of states. Northwest, Northeast, Midwest, Southeast, Southwest. 5 premiers for 5 regions of the country. I like the idea of having parts of the country sort of designated for conservatives or liberals. We sort of have that now, but probably not for much longer. What we have now is a state-appointed candidates. They are not chosen by the public. They're chosen by the political party and the media, and voting has become more about the beliefs of a cult than the voters' own personal interests.
Wow.
Pretty thought-provoking, huh?
Yeah, I align with quite a few of those thoughts personally. I mean, abolishing political parties would be that's a good point. In fact,
yeah, I'm on board with that. Yeah.
In the founding of this country, that was one of the things they were really concerned about, that because it creates division between
tribalism.
People. Yeah, exactly. And lobbying, that's another thing. That's essentially the government or the state being controlled by businesses and organizations and special interests and stuff like that. And that does more harm than good in most cases.
Yeah. Wasn't tribalism one of the spirits we defeated on Halloween?
Yes, it was. I think you gave him the sword. Yeah. Check that episode out, by the way, if you haven't seen it. It took us a long time to make it because it was just the two of us and we have no skills. So
we did everything.
Yeah. Oh man. There's a very good kind of message here in this comment that I do like, and the regional kind of thing. I don't know about making quadrants and stuff like that. I think that's probably kind of a unnecessary artificial boundary. I think that the biggest divisions in this country, where he's saying like conservatives and liberals, the biggest divisions are the rural and the urban centers. Urban centers tending to be a little bit more liberal, and conservative people tending to be in more rural areas. Not that it's always the case, but
I mean, majority speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think if anything, if you're going to divide up anything, we've already got divisions in place. Just transition to sovereign states, you know, like
Yeah.
if you're going to do any of that, and then they can all handle things however they want. The one I didn't really understand or get on board with is making voting illegal. Like, what exactly is the alternative there? Like, how do people get their voice heard?
Well, like we had talked about, what about the whole lottery system? You know, I'm not entirely certain that abolishing voting is necessarily the best course, given how things currently are. But if it was a lottery, you'd have representation of everybody because it's completely random, as opposed to the whole political parties and people rising to power in those parties, and you know, that kind of thing, partisanship and divisions based on that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he's suggesting something like that after that, because if you have representatives, how do they get there?
Yeah. Yeah, one thing he didn't mention here, but I'm guessing he'd probably be on board with is, like, if we have term limits on the president, why not everybody else? Because
Judges,
Senate, Congress, like, all that stuff is just that there's people who just perch there forever, and you get this like swath of like ebb and flow between which party has control of what, and it's like, this whole two-party thing drives me spare. Like, we got to get rid of it.
yeah, it totally does. And it could be argued that Congress has more power than the president. Especially when it comes to partisan politics, where you have, like you said, one party is the majority, and then another, they basically dictate what happens. And the thing is, I just want to say, walk around your town or city or whatever and look at people and see them as people, because we're a lot more alike than we are different. And I think the dividing people based on parties, and people like beating each other up and fighting in the streets and arguing and yelling based on politics, like, it's fucking stupid, and it doesn't do us any good. It actually sets us back quite a lot, and progress is going to be very slow as a result of that. Just my thought.
So Raymond had a second comment that was more pointedly directed toward the topic of the Electoral College. He said, the purpose of the Electoral College is to prevent mob rule. Before the consolidation of the media, the advent of national news networks like CNN and Fox News, and before the internet, the public had thousands of different perspectives of the news. The majority of people get their information from these sources, and that is the problem. The majority isn't always right. Without the Electoral College, big cities will determine the elections, and it will be impossible to have a two-party system, and literally impossible for there to be a multi-party system. There are far more registered Democrat voters than any other political party, and not a single big city in the US that isn't controlled by Democrats. So getting rid of the Electoral College is in their favor, which is probably why we're hearing more about the idea of eliminating
it. He's pretty spot on there, actually.
I mean, not every big city. I did look into that. It is like 70% of big metropolises are Democratic, but if you think about like their core values, they tend to be more socially focused, and in a dense social environment, it makes sense that that's kind of the primary focus. And in the rural areas, it tends to be more individual focused, you know, so it stands to reason. But like, I think and I'd like to do an episode or at least a minute microscopy on this compartmentalization that we have, where, like, you know, in this day and age, we could easily spread out more, like give each other elbow room.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But we don't, you know?
No, it's the same effect that happens anywhere you go, like in a parking lot or you know, I go into a
urinal.
yeah, urinals. So I go into like a restaurant, like a fast food restaurant, and I pick my seat, and it's way in the back. There's a whole bunch of empty tables, and the next customer that comes in, where do they sit? Right freaking next to me. Like, you have all these tables spread out a little bit. No, people want to be right up next to each other. And you know, maybe it speaks something to my personality. Like, I like a little bit of elbow room, like some breathing room there. That would be nice. Kind of like the people that you're standing in line at the grocery store and they're basically like humping your leg. They're so close. It's like, dude, back up a little bit. No, that's a good point. And what he said about the media, that's totally true. The major media organizations, they are consolidated. In fact, I would argue there's pretty much one real media is essentially, major media is one mind essentially, and that is sell news. And it used to be, a long time ago, it was about critical thinking and criticizing things and uncovering the truth and stuff. And there were lots of organizations, and they were all competing for good stories. And, you know, the journalistic integrity was a huge part of it. And that's completely gone. If you look at the way things work now, you turn on the news, it doesn't matter who it is. It's just a bunch of bogus stuff. It's like fear mongering, or a bunch of opinion, or a panel of people yelling at each other. It's just like, what the hell is this? This isn't news, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely way more opinion than objectivity. And yeah, even in the last 30 or so years, I've noticed that shift in the paradigm. Like, it's definitely more about ratings than anything now. And I mean, there's a lot of things you could point to for why that's the case. It could be political, it could be profit driven, you know, like there's a lot of different factors at play there.
Yeah, and I would say one thing that changed the game majorly is the 24-hour news cycle. That is a huge difference. Satellite communications and the internet, which allowed instantaneous data transfer. I mean, it used to be people would have to wait, and they'd get the paper, and it was printed on a printing press and delivered by the paper boy and stuff. Yeah. Nowadays, you just like jump online and bam, you got instant news. I mean, you can know what's happening in real time now. And I think that changes things, because people don't, it used to be you'd stop and you'd think. As a reporter or a journalist, you would formulate the statement. You would collect data, you put it together, and you'd create a story. And now it's just like, data comes in, data goes out. Like, there's no delay. They don't even think about it. I mean, we see it all the time where something happens and it goes viral all of a sudden, and it turns out, oh, well, it was completely different than the way that everybody interpreted it with limited information.
I'd say the biggest detriment to the news, even though on the whole I don't see it as a detriment, is social media. Because
Twitter is a cesspool of bullshit.
Everybody becomes the commentator, and their followers or friends or whatever, they place stock in that person's opinion. And I think a lot more people than not will just read a person's interpretation or read the headline, and which the headlines are always sensationalistic, and they'll draw.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
Like,
that's the thing. Like, people skim through the news, and they just read the headlines, and the headlines. Yeah, the headlines are supposed to kind of summarize what's going on, and then you read the article. People don't do that. They just say, "Oh, this happened. So-and-so did this thing, and this thing is bad, or this thing's good. This is going to kill you. This will save your life." You know, Like no one ever reads anything and they don't think about it. And I
Funniest
think
one I saw was it was about music, so not like a huge deal, but it said the headline was like tragic cancer news from the Foo Fighters, and I was like, oh no, who's sick? And I read the article, and it's like the Foo Fighters played a benefit show for cancer, and it's like, what?
oh, jeez. Yeah, that's the thing. That's why it's important. So extraordinary statements require extraordinary evidence, and like the more sensational and emotionally backed something seems, the more critical you should be of it, and the more encouraged you should be to like dive into it and kind of read it and research and just take your time and stop and think. Yeah, because that's the thing. Oh man, that's a huge problem.
I just realized we went way off of the Electoral College here.
Oh yeah.
His first line, though, the purpose of the Electoral College is to prevent mob rule. I don't remember if we talked enough about the tyranny of minority, where, and this kind of wraps in with the social media thing, like the squeakiest wheel tends to be what you think of is the majority thought, but it's actually more often than not the minority making a lot of noise. And if you allow that to run rampant, more people than not will be pissed off because, I mean, yeah, okay,
Well,
the
yeah.
majority's not always right, but the minority um, may possibly be less right more often.
Yeah,
Possibly.
exactly. And that's why I think it's important, especially if you start feeling emotional, stop and think and do
Collaborate
your
and listen.
research. Yeah. Yeah, like dig into it and do your research, I think. Now I don't know that I would agree the Electoral College was designed to prevent mob rule. I think it was more about balancing the power of the states against each other, more populous versus less populous, because that was a huge concern back in the day. You got to remember how things were, when this country was founded. It was sovereign states, essentially. It was colonies and stuff, and the states were concerned about one state being too powerful or dictating what the other states could do. And I think it's a valid concern even today. Why is Iowa a big deal? You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
But then California is also a big deal, and they've got a huge population. So
exactly. Yeah, and I think we went into like how you could more effectively balance that, given how things have changed. And the thing is, the people who put the structural elements of this country together, they were living 200 years ago when things were sparse and new and nothing was established, and things change. We maybe do need to revise it, but not revise it in such a way that California can dictate how the rest of the country lives. Just saying.
yeah, I mean, I think more than anything, it was a convenience thing. Like at the time, with mail coming by horse and stuff, like trying to tally even hundreds of thousands of votes from all over the country would have been really difficult. So finding ways to like funnel it into shorter packets made some more sense back then. But now, like, the popular vote could easily be counted in a very short time, even though we've got hundreds of millions of people. Like,
Yeah, and like I think we'd address this a little bit, but originally the president was elected by the states. The idea was the federal side of things interacted with the states, not necessarily the general public. So the states would elect the president, and then the people in the states would elect various representatives within that state and that kind of thing. So
I mean, it
I
kind of
think,
works that way now.
yeah, it does. But some people are pissed about that because they think, well, the popular vote should just elect the president. And it's like, well, maybe things have gotten too big. Maybe it's too complex. I don't know. But then again, Congress has a lot more power than the president. Actually, in fact, the Pentagon has more power than the president. Let's not forget that. But anyway, we're kind of going off on a tangent as usual.
So we have a segment that we do every so often called the lightning round, where we take most of our major categories and we give ourselves 5 minutes each, and Erik picks half of them and I pick half of them, and we don't know until the topic comes up what we're going to be talking about, and we just riff on it for 5 minutes. And so, we don't have time to prepare anything. We're just going off our gut. We're going off what we know, how we feel. And so one of the topics that we addressed in our second lightning round was, I think you brought this up, should it be okay to sell your organs? Mm-hmm. And one of our viewers, Jennifer Wolf, said no one would prepay for an organ just due to the uncertainty of the condition of the organs upon your death. And, that's not a bad point, because like who's to say if you were like, oh, hey, do you want to earmark my liver? And they'd be like, yeah, sure, you look pretty fit. And then you'd be like, hey, all of a sudden I really love vodka, and you're just like, like yeah, you might have got a raw deal there.
That's true. I think there's ways of overcoming those challenges. I think anybody selling organs would have a huge interest in providing a good product, as any business does. So if you frequently sold livers to people and they dropped dead because of alcoholism, I don't think you'd be in business very long. So one could say there might be organizations that would verify that, third-party organizations and stuff, so you could kind of like double check, kind of like Carfax or something like that. How's this person live their life? Is that liver, those kidneys, are they good? How's their
gut facts?
yeah. Well, exactly. So I think, if in a vacuum with no oversight whatsoever, sure, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, go ahead and give me that heart that came from some random person on the street that
Yeah, well,
but it wouldn't work that way. Something that important would definitely be checked and double checked.
Yeah, like in the moment, I think I was thinking along the lines of, and I mean, we have 5 minutes and we're off the cuff here.
Yeah,
but, like in the moment, I was thinking like, why would I want to go up to somebody and be like, hey, can I get your liver if I need it now? Who knows when you're going to die? And if I don't need it now, why would I be buying it in the first place? So, but I think now that I think about it more, like it would probably be like a pool. Like you would go to some organization, like you were saying, and be like, I would like to sell my organ or whatever. And I don't know, maybe they give you half up front and half to your estate when you're dead or whatever.
Well, yeah.
Work. But, that way it's like, people are dying left and right or whatever, and people sign up to buy whatever organ they need as they need it or something. So that might actually.
Yeah, you'd probably sign a contract or something. It'd be a lot like being an organ donor.
Mm-hmm.
You elect to be an organ donor, saying, yeah, when I die, I'm going to give my organs to people that need them. I'm an organ donor. I don't give a shit. What does it matter,
And I think I brought this up, like maybe the monetary exchange for any organ, whatever it is, so you're not ascribing value to all of them, is just to cover your funeral costs,
Yeah, well, that's an option too. The thing is, there's probably a lot of different ways you could do it. And maybe some people will just be generous and say, I don't need any money. Like myself, being an organ donor doesn't give you a cent. But I feel like, well, if something's useful, why not? If I could get some money for it, that'd be sweet. I could buy my sailboat.
I'm an organ donor, but all my organs are probably trash. Like, I don't know.
Well, maybe your eyes or something, like, that's a thing.
I went through a lot of chemo and radiation. I don't know if anything's in like top-notch shape, but
well, it's a matter of the value would be a little bit less than somebody who's not gone through chemo. So, and if you're less financially secure, you could maybe buy the chemo eyes instead of the bodybuilder eyes.
They click on my page and it's like womp.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that it's that statement is valid, but it's assuming things would be a certain way, and I think the circumstances would adapt to the situation if it was legal to sell your organs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just because the customers would demand it. Would you have an unknown heart in some styrofoam box that somebody delivered? That, like, would you allow somebody to just put that into you without having any kind of guarantee or system in place to check those things? I think those systems would exist.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we pretty much have to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, there's one remaining episode that had some thought-provoking comments, and that was on it was the episode "Ghosts of War," where we discussed whether or not the Confederate flag was a racist symbol.
Oh yeah.
And a gentleman by the name of Lamont Turner had a couple of comments. He said, "What did William T. Thompson, the designer of the second stainless Confederate flag, say the meaning of the flag was?" And I did look that up.
Yeah, you should probably provide that quote, because I had no idea that there was a second flag.
Yeah, and I believe Powers did mention this, and that's why he commented.
Mm-hmm.
So William Turner, William Thompson, his quote was, "Our idea is simply to combine the present battle flag with a pure white standard sheet, our Southern Cross, blue on a red field, to take the place on the white flag that is occupied by the blue Union in the old United States flag, or the St. George's Cross in the British flag. As a people, we are fighting to maintain the heaven-ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race. A white flag would thus be emblematic of our cause."
Wow. Heaven ordained. Really?
Yeah, so I think he was trying to drive home the point Powers was making, in that there is pretty much no ambiguity in the racist underpinnings of the Confederate flag in pretty much in any incarnation, but in this one they get really specific.
Well, yeah, it's pretty clear in that statement. But the heaven ordained thing, I don't seem to recall the passage in the Bible talking about, where God is like, oh, the black man, they're inferior to the white man.
Yeah.
I don't remember that passage. Somebody can.
Yeah, there was plenty saying that women are inferior, but I don't know. You still have a lot of religious women, so I don't get that one. That's a head scratcher. But
wasn't Jesus actually everybody involved in the tales of the Bible? The tales of the Bible. Weren't they all
Middle Eastern? So
yeah, like tan skin. Yeah. Just saying. So where's
not
the
white, not black, but they were definitely heaven ordained inferior.
Well, and I think those people would be the people that that would be looked down upon as being inferior to the people or the person that wrote that statement. Not the first statement, but the second statement, the quote.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and then he made another point. Lamont Turner, our viewer, he commented, "Another reason poor Southern whites fought is because they didn't want to compete with free blacks for jobs. The cost of a free lunch was going to increase with a Union victory." So
that's interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of something to chew on.
Yeah.
You may not have had necessarily a racist drive per se, but more of an economical drive
Yeah.
for fighting that war.
Well,
Uh,
and I think not.
I would call that white privilege. Like some of the stuff we call white privilege today is a little bit of a stretch, but that's like, oh, well, I like taking advantage of this free labor, you know.
Well, and in that time and place, it was definitely that way. Things were
Mm-hmm.
a lot different. Um, and I think it does point to the fact that when you're talking about the Civil War, things aren't purely black and white. No pun intended, of course. But I think it is a complex thing. I mean, we were talking about humans and their interactions, and yeah, it's never cut and dried in that regard. That's interesting, though.
Yeah. So I don't know, like some of the other comments we had were kind of nice. We also, I'll mention again, we write music, but we have recently started creating some music videos as well. And one of the music videos for a song that was at the end of our 9/11 episode, kind of a tribute to the fallen of 9/11, Tears of the Eagle. A TT Naj said, "This song speaks to me, brings out emotions I didn't know I had," with a little tear face. And I just thought that was really awesome to like reach somebody with our music, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a great song. I mean, you did a great job with that. I
Thank you.
liked it. It was. Let me tell you, putting those names in at the end and having to like play it over and over and over again, and that song. Oh man, that. Bam! Just hit me. That was.
Yeah, and like making the music video was pretty heavy too. Like the part at the end where I'm like standing at the graveyard and I like drop my guitar and like it was like, oh man.
Yeah. I think that's what happens with really good music. Like
Yeah,
it
like
should.
really good music should give you goosebumps, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
it should elicit a physiological response, and
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
love, you know.
Exactly. Tell a story. Um, Evoke emotion, things like that, make people think maybe.
Yeah,
And there's no better way than through song.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't take specific clips of these, but we had a lot of positive comments with, the episode we did on family, people that were also adopted who met their biological family and how they handled it and how their family handled it. All that was really awesome to hear. We talked
Yeah.
about suicide and people were like, this really, I had to like emotionally prepare myself like for a long time to watch this episode, but I'm glad I did, like just stuff like that was really cool to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. That's what I live for. It's great connecting
Yeah.
with people.
So
And we've made friends with people, met new people that we didn't know before. It's
yeah,
great.
yeah. Like I'd say all in all, like this year has been awesome. Like doing this, it just
Mhm.
went by like a breeze. And we put out stuff every week, and we've had a lot of good conversations and a lot of good points brought up by people we know or didn't know before, and we're making inroads all over the place. So it's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. Like it is a little bit of work, given that it's just us. We're not making any money doing this.
Yeah,
So it's a labor of love. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of brought out a lot of creativity. Um, check out the slightly modified intro that we spent a bunch of time working on for
oh
season 2.
yeah, season 2, you're gonna love the slight modifications.
Yeah, it took us all day to do just like what, a half a second worth of footage. Jesus Christ. Oh man. Um yeah, it's great. I'm totally looking forward to the next season and more stuff, more conversations, and I definitely we're going to probably come back to previous things and revisit them as we like to do.
Yeah, I mean, we went over quite a few episodes worth of comments here, and a lot of them we could have just gone on a whole episode rant. So we should probably try to do these a little more frequently in season 2.
Yeah, and I'd encourage people, if you're somebody sitting watching or listening or whatever, go leave a comment. It'll keep the conversation going, maybe spark more conversation, and chances are we're probably going to talk about it. So you're going to be highlighted in there.
Yeah, leave the comment on YouTube rather than Facebook, because people watch the videos on YouTube, and if you want them to join in the point that you want to make it visible to them too, because they may not follow us on Facebook. So make that your hub for the conversation, and it'll also drive up the algorithm so more people will see your point. So
yeah, exactly. And maybe at some point we'll get monetization and be able to improve the quality of the content, but that's okay.
Well, imagine if we had money coming into this show, what we could do.
Yeah. Whoa, $1. How am I going to spend that?
Not all in one place.
Exactly. Oh man. So yeah, that's wow. We covered a lot of stuff. Those are really good comments. Like I wish we could spend more time, but we've been talking about it, just a few comments for like an hour now. So
yeah,
that's probably a good point to wrap it up. And yeah.
So stick around for the song until the next dive. And I know it's a long wait, but we'll see you next week for season 2.
Yeah, for Kitchen Sink's sake, hang in there.
And subscribe, goddammit.
Yeah, exactly. And Happy New Year. Whatever. Yeah.
Happy New Season.
New season, yeah. Oh, man. All right. Well, thanks for deep sink diving with us.
One foot in a political grave, put the author on a ballot. Hearing out the other side's opinion got me feeling it's worth it. Seems like there is someone round the corner always listening to me, concocting a new kind of conspiracy, placing freedom in dire jeopardy. It's like I'm coming apart at the seams that I've just begun. Money and currency, but it's a courtesy for the Thank you.